Okay, so this is Andy Revkin. This is this year's Blogging a Better Planet class at Pace University. And we're visiting here with David Roberts, who spent many years online blogging for Grist about politics and the environment and related issues, energy. He's a very wise and passionate man. And then he told his readers a little over a year ago, hasta la vista, and unplugged. And there's a great article that he wrote in Outside Magazine in which he lays out the basics. But one thing that wasn't spelled out fully in the article is why you came back to this life. Now, some people take a hiatus and go off in a new direction. You kind of toyed sleeplessly with fiction, and it didn't sound like that went well. But you also could have just gone to work for Greenpeace, or you could have gone back to get a PhD or whatever. So what drew you back to the online world?
Sure. Well, I ran out of money. But I mean, I can't really imagine what else I would do. I'm not really fit for much else, and I love Grist. I always loved my job. I loved the work I do. I always did love it, and absent early retirement, I think it's probably the best choice for me.
So, what is it about that process that you love? What makes it work?
Well, I got a degree in philosophy way back in the day. And it was always because I wanted to kind of understand how things worked, how people worked, how societies worked, stuff like that, at the broadest sort of general level. And what I've found is that I'm much more able to do that as a blogger than I would have been as a philosopher. Academic philosophy is horribly boring now and specialized. And what I love about Grist is I'm able to read widely about lots of different subjects and kind of pull things together and try to figure out how they work and explain them to people who want to understand them. It's sort of, it's the perfect job.
So I'm going to ask a couple more questions before I turn it over to the floor here for some as well. But, one thing, your blog posts, many of them are very, very thoroughly grounded. They're not tossed off. They're not just a bunch of links thrown together. And the piece that you wrote for Outside was reflective of that. You had these wonderful allusions to books that you read, I guess some of them while you were on hiatus, but some of them probably before then, that you really articulated some pretty solid thoughts with a grounding and a kind of graceful writing that was not bloggish. What's the range of things that you consider blogging? I mean, is that...
Well, that has changed quite a bit. I'm sure, as you know, it's changed quite a bit since blogs first were sort of taking off. I remember in the early 2000s, blogging was this huge thing, and back then was sort of the establishment of the blog as we think of it now, which is fast-paced, sort of informal, responsive, and all that. But I sort of feel like as time has gone on, this is true for me, and I think it's true for a lot of other bloggers too. There's a lot more outlets now for your fast thoughts, for your instant reactions, for your, hey, look at this link. All that stuff now goes on Twitter or Facebook or there's lots of other ways to get it out. So I feel like a lot of the short popcorn stuff has been filtered out of the blog world now, at least for me. And so now I spend more time on my blog posts, and as you know, write painfully long blog posts. But that's and I've noticed that's true. I've noticed the pace has slowed a little bit in the blogosphere generally speaking because the fast-paced stuff has moved elsewhere. I always am sort of in the middle. I love doing something like the Outside piece, which goes through, which compared to blogging is so utterly different. It goes through these 2 or 3 big conceptual revisions, and then 2 or 3 or 4 more drafts where you're just nailing it down tighter and tighter and tighter. And finally, I drove my editor crazy. Finally, there were just 2 or 3 that were just about commas and word choices and things like that. I love doing that, and I wish I could. It made me wish I had time to do more of it on the blog, to really go through drafts and tighten things down, because they really do get better and better, the more work you put into them. But on the other hand, I feel like I do need to be fast enough to kind of at least keep people interested, and at least to be able to call it a blog. I can't just be doing one thing a week, or I'll be a columnist, So,
right.
So it's a balance in the middle, and I don't really know what the right answer is, or what not really sure what people want anymore. So I just end up kind of writing what I want to write.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting quandary on the web right now with everybody. I think no one. Well, there's several different unknowns. Well, there's many unknowns. One is how do you make this a business? One is what do people want? At what level? I also feel the same way. To me, Twitter is my blog, pretty much. It's just the same for the same reasons you were talking about. And the blog, I'm trying to shift out to being less aggregaty and more reflective. But then you're always pulled back by the news. Something will happen, and you'll feel if you don't comment or don't write something, then the moment will pass, and no one will care what you say anyway.
Sure. I mean, what I try to do is, it's all a balance. And my balance, what I would like to do is kind of enter the news cycle, insert myself into the news cycle when I have something to say of value about something that happened. Who I feel bad for is these kind of bloggers who are obliged by their jobs to just be chained to the 24-hour news cycle, because that's most of it. I mean, if there's one thing I learned from taking a year off it's that the vast majority of what goes on in the 24-hour news cycle does not matter at all. It never bubbles up out of there. It never makes any impression. Never affects anything. Most of it is just fluff and froth. And so I would like to be, I'd like to be responsive when I have expertise. I just don't want to be chained to it and have to write about news all the time. It would be nice, though, if people involved in the news, when something happened that I have expertise on, knew that I was out there and had expertise and looked to me for it. So, again, it's a balance. You have to say something when you have something to say. But again, like, Andy, I don't know what your incentives are, your pressures are. Grist, I think Grist is nonprofit, and I think unlike for-profit, a place like BuzzFeed or something is not purely a slave to traffic. Obviously wants more traffic and wants more clicks, but has other values and goals as well. So I'm not personally sort of pushed to generate clicks. That's not my primary goal. But I have sympathy for these young writers, these 20-year-old writers on BuzzFeed who are judged purely on clicks, and so just end up chasing, like, this kitten befriended this panda. You'll see 20 versions of that story on whatever the 20 versions of BuzzFeed are out there now. Have these armies of young people who just have to write crap like that all the time, and it seems like all that energy they spend and time they spend could be better spent elsewhere, but I don't know what the financial model is for them.
Do you have any sense whether there's a cycle to this too, that whole, the thing like listicles, is that what they're called? These are, Vox and Upshot are all just trying to jump on that boat, and Mashable and, as you said, BuzzFeed really invented this.
I sort of like what Vox is doing with it. I mean, you sort of take the form and try to stuff a bunch of good information in it. You know what I mean? There's nothing sort of intrinsically wrong with breaking things up into small chunks. You can do it better or poorly. I like the way Vox is doing it.
Yeah, I'm interested in that too, and the Upshot is doing some interesting things, generating lists that actually have some meaning. They had one just today on ranking schools by their sort of economic inclusiveness. They came up with a new index, the College Accessibility Index, or something like that.
Lists and charts can be helpful, and people are visual on the internet, and there's no getting around it. Pretty much, you have to. I don't think it's all bad. I don't think it's all sort of cheap and frothy, but it's definitely a lot of froth for a small amount of good stuff.
Right. So you've changed some of your habits, it sounds like.
Well.
Or tried.
It's hard to establish new work habits when you're not working. You know what I mean? So the whole better work habits part of this is an ongoing project. I mean, I feel like I have been better so far, calmer and less likely to chase things around, less likely to get all frazzled, but I don't know how much of that is just sort of like a peaceful hangover from my sabbatical that'll eventually get squeezed out of me by the internet. But yeah, I mean, it's all just obvious stuff. I take more breaks now. I just got back from a long walk, actually, just before we started talking. It's a good thing you guys don't have smell-o-vision.
Wait, do you really do the 10,000 step thing every day now?
Well, it's less than every day now, but it's I'm trying to, do yoga or walk or get some sort of exercise at least 3 or 4 times a week, But it's all over the long term, right? I mean, it's easy to do anything for a week or two. It's whether I can establish a sustainable pattern will be the telling question.
So let me see if there's any questions out here from among the students. Does anything come to mind? Oh, sorry. Any questions? Yeah. Say who you are.
Hi, my name's Miguel. I just wanted to know how difficult was it for you initially when you first cut all social media off?
It was, I don't know if it was difficult. It was odd. It was very odd because, your body, it's not just your mind, but your body that gets in the rhythm of these things. And it's your body that responds to these little buzzes and notifications and alerts every few seconds. And you get mental and physical cycles that are synced to that kind of buzz, buzz, buzz. And when you cut them off all of a sudden, occasionally I would just get this sort of surge, very familiar from my work life, this sort of surge of like angst all of a sudden, like whatever I'm doing, I ought to be doing something else. I'm supposed to be doing something else, which is a constant feature of blogging and journalistic life, and I think information work generally. And I would still get those surges. I'd be like, I should be, even when there's clearly nothing I should be doing. And I would get on my phone and stare at it, and it would take me like 10 seconds to be like, right, there's nothing on here. Well, I'm just looking at it, and there's nothing happening. I've taken everything off it. But those habits stuck with me for quite a while. But was it hard? Like, no, I'd get a surge of adrenaline and angst and think, I'm supposed to be working on something, and then I would realize, oh, I'm not supposed to be working on anything, and every time that happened, I'd be like, oh. So it was pleasant to watch the symptoms fade, really. I didn't miss it at all, to be honest.
Anything else from your mind? Yeah, say who you are.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth. Which social media platform was the hardest to withdraw from?
Well, I didn't spend a ton of time on any but Twitter. I mean, I had a Facebook account that I would cross-post stuff to, sometimes more of the personal stuff. And, I Instagrammed a little bit for a while. But it was Twitter that was sort of the working tool, the tool that I used for work and the tool that I spent most time on. And so that was the hardest one to give up. And I was telling somebody this the other day, like it had gotten to the point where I was tweeting so much that it's like, I don't know how to describe it, it's like a musician that starts to think in keys and chords. I started thinking in 140 character chunks. So like something would happen in my life, or I would see something or have a reaction to something, or my kid would say something cute, something would happen, and immediately, boop, 140, like a perfectly formed tweet would pop into my head, and I would just know whether it would fit or not. I just know. I don't have to count characters anymore. And that habit persisted for a long time. It never really totally went away. Every time I still get tweets in my head. But you think for a while, actually, when you tweet everything for a while, when you tweet everything you think and everything that happens to you, you get in the habit of that. It starts to be, like if something amazing happens, like you see an incredible sunset or something, and you don't have your phone with you or whatever, and you can't tweet it, you start thinking, what good is a friggin' sunset if nobody even hears about it? Like, nobody even knows I saw this. It doesn't even count. But that, too, fades over time, and eventually it was nice to just not have to tell everybody about everything. But I haven't stopped thinking in tweets. That's still, I think it might be a permanent condition.
Yeah, interesting. But is it true that you hit a limit, that you were blocked?
Yes, I hit the daily tweet limit, which now is 2,500 tweets, but it wasn't that back then. Back then it was merely 1,000 tweets.
That's still insane. I can't even imagine how that could be possible without your thumb.
It was during something like Obama's State of the Union speech, or I think one of those Obama-Romney debates where everybody's just kind of constantly sending out their zingers as it goes on and responding to everything, and I got really into it and hit a limit, and then went over to Facebook to complain about my Twitter limit.
How does Twitter manifest when that happens? Does a little red sign come up or something?
Yeah, it's just an error message.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
So you don't imagine you'll be doing that again? You'll be maxing out again?
If I hit 2,500 tweets in a day, I want someone to come and physically restrain me, drag me back onto sabbatical.
Do you get the sense that in the year you were offline, is anything in the sort of the gestalt of the environmental blogging world changed in a measurable way that you could see, or just something that felt different?
I think I haven't, to be honest, the one rule I really did follow strictly is the whole time I was gone, I read nothing about environmental anything, or climate anything, or energy anything. And so I haven't thought about it or read anything about it in so long, and now I'm kind of tiptoeing back into it, so I don't really know yet.
Yeah.
I do think Twitter has changed in some good and not so good ways. I think it's gotten bigger and more professionalized, and there's less of a, I don't know, it feels more public now and less intimate than it used to. It used to feel a little bit like there were smaller networks of people and more honesty, and now there's just these sort of, I don't know, it's gotten, I know a lot of people who have between the time I left and got back, kind of burn out on it and are thinking about pulling back or leaving it.
That's interesting. So do you already have an agenda for your blogging, or you?
I want to get into other subject matters, or at least broaden a little bit my range of stuff that I write about. You know, and some of the most popular posts I've done, like my Medium Chill posts, which I never expected to do anything, and has become this weird, beloved favorite that I hear about all the time. I might try to write about stuff like that more often, because, you know, the two things I write most about, which are climate change and American politics. Climate change is moving very slowly. As you know, there aren't really daily events to write about, so you end up kind of scraping to find something to write about every day, unless it's a new PDF from MIT or whatever that 12 people in the world care about. Right. And then the other one is American politics, which isn't moving at all now. It's totally frozen. It's totally paralyzed, and shows every sign of being totally paralyzed for the next decade. I mean, unless some sort of exogenous force intervenes, unless something changes big time, politics is stuck. So the poor people, I mean, honestly, I feel so bad for the people who have to write about politics all day, every day, because there's nothing of substance that ever happens anymore. So it's all, you know, gaffes and infighting and backbiting and rumor, and it's just terrible. So I would like to branch out from those two and get into some other things where there's interesting stuff to say and interesting stuff happening. As to what exactly that will be, I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
So the thesis behind this course, which is now in its 5th year, getting its 5th year, that I teach is it's possible to blog a better planet. In other words, not just blogging. The course is not about blogging. It's about using online tools to make the world a better place. It's not just environmental. It's you know, social progress as well. But you get the sense, given how all these tools, like any tool, can be used for bad or good, that overall these communication portals are making the world, or can make the world better?
I don't know. I mean, I sort of resist. Every new technology that comes along is a great fascination to people, and they think it's going to change the world. Some in bad ways, in good ways, but usually just in exaggerated ways. And usually what happens is human nature is kind of stable and more or less the same as time goes on. And so I think all the struggles are the same, whether you have these social media tools or not. I mean, obviously there's lots of awesome stuff that you can do with them. You can connect groups of people, communities of interest. You can organize stuff very easily. You can get misinformation out much more easily. You can do bad stuff much more easily. But in the end, the sort of balance of forces is what it is, and I don't think social media will change that substantially one way or the other.
Any last questions from Koya? Koya has a question.
Hi.
I wanted to know, what was your family's reaction when you took your long break?
Your family's reaction.
When I left work,
Yeah.
well, obviously I didn't just announce it. I mean,
Well, you might have.
I mean, it wasn't even a real thing until I talked with my wife about it. You know, I was talking about how the job has eaten my life and how it'd be nice to have time to do other stuff. And she's like, well, why don't you just take a year off and do other stuff? We could probably swing that. And I was like, oh, so it could be a real thing. And then, of course, I got obsessed with it and had to do it. But by and large, they loved it. I mean, my wife loved it because I'm home all the time, washing dishes and doing laundry and getting pet food and making her life easier. She could, you know, she'd come home and put her feet up and watch Mariners games. So she's all into having a house husband, having a kept man. And I saw a lot more of my kids, and we took them out of after-school care, so they got to come right home after school, and we, you know, have all those hours in the afternoon just to mess around, and they love that. So it's great. I mean, honestly, like having a single earner household, it just works. It's so much easier and calmer and better. It's unfortunate that the vast majority of people, including me after this year, can't afford to do it.
That sounds like a blog there. That would build on what you just wrote in outside.
Might just be.
You know, just about. Yeah, my wife and I had a period where she stopped teaching, and it felt easier, even though it was more of a struggle and otherwise. So it's interesting. Yeah, and no one can afford to do that.
Yeah, we're sort of coasting in on fumes.
So any last words of advice for these? Most of the people in the room have not blogged already. A couple have, and they're diving into this arena where in the next 3 weeks they'll have to winnow down to a blog theme and start doing it.
They're blogging, huh? Well, all I would say is that the internet is awesome for bouncing around and gathering in information from a broad array of sources, and sort of, it's amazing the amount of information you can gather in a short time, just pulling in all the different streams. But that stuff is all streaming into your RAM, your short-term memory, and to have it get knit together into a coherent set of views or a coherent worldview, or to have it move into long-term memory and mean anything to you, that requires turning away from the screen and giving your brain, your subconscious, a little time to chug away on its own. So that means taking breaks, taking walks, doing yoga, whatever it is you like to do, play a musical instrument, knit, whatever it is. Your brain needs time to take all that information and make something out of it. And that doesn't happen while you're staring at a screen and getting pulled around in 10 directions. So even if purely only to be a better blogger, you should take breaks and take some non-screen time, build it into your day.
Great. Well, we wish you the best in your return to this virtual part of your life.
All right. Knock on wood.
Yeah, really. And you and I, I'm sure, will be talking or tweeting to each other off and on in the weeks to come. So take care. Thanks for popping in.
Thanks, Andy. Bye, y'all.